I never thought a simple drive back from a camping trip could turn into a nightmare. It was a typical rainy night, the kind where every drop hitting the windshield morphed into a blinding sheet of water, making the road ahead almost invisible. There we were, me, Mia, and Lucas, laughing and swapping stories from our trip, trying to ignore the worsening storm outside. As we curved around the mountain road, something weird happened with the radio. It crackled, hissed, then spat out bits of static that drowned out our tunes. I reached to fiddle with it, hoping to get back our music, but it was like the radio had a mind of its own. Just as I thought it was fixed, it would flip back to static, each time louder than the last. Then came the thud. It wasn't subtle, a harsh, solid sound of something hitting the car. We all froze. Did we hit something? Lucas asked, peering out into the rain. I pulled over, my heart hammering as I rolled down my window, letting in the cold, wet air. Nothing but darkness and rain met my eyes. We got out, our flashlights barely cutting through the fog as we checked around. The rear bumper was smeared with mud, but there was no sign of what we hit. Anxious but unharmed, we climbed back inside, the car feeling a bit less safe than before. The drive resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The light banter was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence broken only by the sound of heavy rain pounding on the roof. I tried to focus on the road, but then a scraping noise started up from underneath the car. It was a grating, metallic sound, like something was being dragged beneath us. We stopped again, hearts racing as we searched under the car. Nothing. It made no sense. We were all spooked, jumping at the sound of our own breathing. Back on the road, the real terror began. It started with a faint tapping against the rear window. Mia turned to look and screamed. There, on the glass, was a handprint. It appeared suddenly, as if someone had pressed their hand from the outside, fogging up the spot with their breath. But when we blinked, it was gone. That was when panic truly set in. I floored the accelerator, desperate to get away from whatever was tormenting us. The engine moaned under the strain as if struggling against an unseen force. I glanced in the rearview mirror and my blood froze. There was a figure, ragged and eerie, running impossibly fast through the storm, keeping pace with our car. Its eyes, if you could call them that, reflected the headlights, shining with an unnatural gleam. Lucas and Mia were shouting now, fear overtaking us all as the figure slammed against the side of the car. The impact was strong enough to make the whole vehicle shudder. I swerved, trying to shake it off, but it clung on, relentless. The car's lights flickered on and off, as if the creature's presence was sucking the life out of everything electrical. In desperation, I pushed the car to its limits, the engine screaming in protest. We were nearing the edge of town, the first streetlights flickering in the distance like beacons of hope. The creature gave one last thud against the car, then fell back, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as it had appeared. We didn't stop until we reached my driveway, under the safety of the street lamps. Jumping out, we saw the damage, dents and deep scratches that looked more like claw marks than anything human. We reported it, of course, but what could we say? That something had chased us, something that couldn't be explained? The police found nothing, and who could blame them? What were they looking for? The rest of the night, we huddled inside, jumping at every shadow and every sound. Even now, when the rain starts to fall and the wind howls through the trees, I remember that night. The terror, the helplessness, the feeling of being hunted, it stays with you. And sometimes, when the storm is bad enough, I swear I can hear that scraping sound, like something is still out there, waiting for us to hit the road again. Adding to the horror, the next day, as we inspected the car in daylight, we found a piece of tattered, soaked fabric caught in the rear door. None of us recognized it, and it was too coarse to be from any of our gear. The idea that something had been that close, that it had touched our car with such intensity, chilled us to the bone. We threw it out, trying to forget, but some fears linger longer than others, and some nights are darker than most. It was the kind of rain that seemed to pour straight through you, chilling to the bone. I was driving home from a late shift. Midnight had struck a while ago, and every droplet of rain hitting my windshield felt like it was trying to drive me back. The road was a blurry river of shadows, and my headlights barely cut through the thick curtain of water. I'd driven this road countless times, but tonight it felt alien, threatening even, with its winding turns and the eerie quiet broken only by the thudding of rain and the rhythmic swish-swash of the wipers. My mind was foggy from the fatigue of the day's work, but a sinking feeling in my gut told me to stay alert. Just as I was trying to shake off the weariness, my headlights flickered. Once, twice, it was like the darkness momentarily swallowed up the world. Each time the lights came back, they caught glimpses of figures darting across the road. Not once but multiple times, shadows moving too quick, too fluid to be human. I tried to convince myself it was just the tricks of light and shadow, but the radio crackling to life shattered that little comfort. A garbled voice broke through, something about an escaped convict, a warning cut short by static. Then silence again. My heart started to race, the grip on my steering wheel tightened. I rounded a bend in there, in the middle of the road, was an abandoned car, its doors wide open, lights on, as if whoever was inside had fled in a hurry. I swerved around it, my mind racing with thoughts of who or what they were running from. Pushing my car to go faster, the rain intensified, and that's when I saw him, a figure in a raincoat, standing by the roadside. As I passed, he turned, his face hidden under the hood, but I felt his eyes on me, piercing through the rain. That wasn't the last I saw of him. Every few minutes, I'd spot him again, always closer, always following. My nerves were on edge, panic setting in. What did he want? Was he the convict the radio mentioned? My thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The car's interior light flickered on by itself, revealing wet footprints inside my car. Footprints that led to the back seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror, heart hammering in my chest. The back door was slightly ajar. That realization hit me harder than the cold air blasting through the gap. I pushed the car harder, the engine groaning under the strain as the figure seemed to keep pace. I heard thumps from behind, as if something or someone was clinging to my car. The road ahead was blurred by the rain and my own panic tears. Finally, lights appeared in the distance, a gas station. Never had I been so relieved to see the fluorescent glow of civilization. I pulled in, nearly crashing into the pump in my haste. I stumbled out of the car, soaked to the skin, and rushed into the convenience store. Inside, I blurted out my story to the attendant, my words tumbling over each other. The man listened, his face a mask of concern mixed with skepticism. He agreed to check my car. I watched from the doorway, my whole body shaking, as he walked around the vehicle, peering into the dark interior. He came back, shaking his head. Nothing. No one was there, and nothing was out of place, except for my nerves. He suggested maybe the shadows and the figure were just figments of my imagination, amplified by the storm and my exhaustion. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. I sat in the booth by the window, waiting for the rain to lighten. As I calmed down, I noticed something on the passenger seat of my car, a piece of paper. I didn't remember putting it there. I hesitated, then went out to grab it. It was a map, hand-drawn, old and worn. It showed a spot marked in the woods just off the road I'd come from. On the back, scribbled hastily, "Don't follow." I stared at it, a new wave of chills running down my spine. The rain had almost stopped. I crumpled the map in my hand, decided. Whatever this was, I didn't want any part of it. I got back into my car, turned it around, and drove off, away from the gas station, away from the marked spot in the woods, determined never to look back. I never liked driving at night, but that Tuesday was different. I had an early morning meeting in Ohio I couldn't miss, and so, against my better judgment, I found myself hitting the highway, the rain pounding like 1,000 drums against my windshield. Visibility was terrible, and each flash of my headlights only revealed another curtain of rain and the slick black tarmac stretching out endlessly ahead. About an hour into my drive, through sheets of rain that made everything else invisible, I saw him, a lone figure, drenched, thumb stuck out, desperate for a ride. Now, I don't usually pick up hitchhikers, but something about seeing him out there in such a bad storm felt wrong. Pulling over, I told myself I was just being a good Samaritan. He climbed in with a muttered thanks, a tall, scruffy guy with eyes that didn't seem to focus on anything in particular. He was carrying nothing but a small, tattered backpack, which he clutched tightly to his chest. Bad night to be out. I tried to sound cheerful, but he only nodded, keeping his gaze fixed on the passing lights. As we drove, the atmosphere inside the car grew heavier. Small talk died on my lips as I stole glances at his hollow cheeks and the deep lines etched into his face. He murmured to himself now and then, words lost beneath the roar of the storm. An unsettling smell seemed to seep from him, like wet earth and something sour I couldn't place. "Could you, take the next left? There's a shortcut." His voice suddenly cut through the drone of the rain, sharp and commanding. It caught me off guard. This road was unfamiliar to him, wasn't it? Yet, he insisted, pointing down a dark, narrow road that twisted off into the trees. Reluctantly, I turned, the headlights slicing through the thick darkness of the overgrown path. That's when I felt it, the real fear, as the space seemed to close in around us. His behavior grew more erratic, his eyes darting around like he was expecting something or someone to jump out at any moment. He kept one hand in his pocket, gripping something. I didn't want to think about what it might be. They follow you, you know? You shouldn't have stopped. Shouldn't have. His words tumbled out, disjointed and laced with urgency. The rain battered harder, as if punctuating his panicked phrases. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had to get out of this situation. The hitchhiker suddenly grabbed the steering wheel, jerking us toward the side of the road. "They're here," he screamed, staring into the rearview mirror at something I couldn't see. My heart raced as I fought for control of the car, the tires skidding on the wet road. Managing to stabilize the vehicle, I saw my chance as the lights of a gas station appeared through the gloom. It was now or never. Feigning agreement with his ramblings, I floored the accelerator. "Just need to stop for gas," I shouted over the noise, more to convince myself than him. As the car skidded slightly on the wet road, I grabbed the moment. I slammed the brakes under the bright lights of the gas station, pretending to struggle with the slippery conditions. Before he could react, I was out of the car, heart pounding, dashing into the brightly lit haven of the station. Inside, among the aisles of snacks and car essentials, I gasped for breath, my voice shaking as I begged the attendant to call the police. Through the window, I saw him get out of the car, look around wildly, then disappear back into the night. The police arrived quickly, their faces grim in the fluorescent light. I explained everything as they listened, their radios crackling softly in the background. They told me I was lucky, it could have gone much worse. They offered to escort me back to the main road, advice I took without hesitation. As I continued my drive, the first pale light of dawn began to break across the horizon, chasing away the shadows of the night. The storm had passed, leaving a calm that felt surreal. My hands still trembled on the wheel, and every shadow seemed to flicker with the memory of the night's terror. But I drove on, the road now clear before me, my mind heavy with the thought of how close I'd come to something truly horrifying. The world seemed a little darker, a little more unpredictable, and I knew I'd never forget the night I learned just how thin the line between normal and nightmare could be.